Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Romano Strassi from B-Lab. It's a pleasure for me to introduce EIDA's Enable iBanking project, a European funded project under a grant agreement with the ENIA agency and between the communication and a European facility program. So today we have 2 hours to discuss what is the state of the art of this project that is mainly dedicated to the identity management in the banking sector. We have many important speakers involved in this midterm workshop, and I have only the role to introduce the topic, starting from some analysis we are doing as a center of research and innovation for the banking sector. So we are in touch with many Italian banks, many international banks. So we have also collected some benchmark regarding the identity management that I would like to show you briefly. The first slide that I show you is a slide dedicated to the priorities of investment that the Italian banks have right now in 2020 in the Italian banking sector. What is interesting is that the third priority is exactly the digital onboarding. So the Italian banks right now are investing a lot in creating new digital onboarding processes for their products and services. We still need to identify and to solve many issues related to the identity management, and so the banks are studying and researching which are the best solution they can use to activate banking services to their customers. You can go on with the slide, and the slide that I would like to underline is the slide that just described the process. Yes, there is a process in which, as a banking players, we need to be sure that the customer is well recognized. Also, we have to be sure that we are following the anti-money laundering obligation, and at the same time, we have to be sure that the customer is satisfied proceeding the process, and so at the end he will be able to conclude the operation, activating and signing a contract for a specific product or banking service. So it's in some way it's a complex process that right now, as you know, mainly is done on a physical branch where the customer can be recognized with the documentation is able to provide. Now we are studying within this project how this onboarding process could be done more efficiently and could be used also for more banking product by the banks. At the same time, we have the issue that we would like to define a process and identification checks that can be also exchanged across European countries. And this is another very complex topic. Going on the next page, we can see that more and more the banks are introducing onboarding, online onboarding processes, mainly starting from the PC, so mainly starting from their own banking and the portal they have, and where the customer can access through the personal computer. But for sure, the smartphone is the second important channel. In some way, is more and more important, and maybe right now it's becoming more important than the personal computer. As you can see, the respondent of this survey, 14 Italian banks, they are saying that also they are working on smartphone, but also on mobile sites, on app for the tablets, and they are thinking also regarding some wearable tool. But we need to be sure that we are focusing the customer, and we are providing a process that is interesting and easy to be used by the customer. And so this is another analysis we have done the past year, where we have done interviews and a survey to something like more than 300 customers that were already they have already used an onboarding process, a digital onboarding process. And as you can see, they are interested, very interested as a customer, and they think it's very important for them to choosing a bank, evaluating how and if they have an online onboarding process. And they choose to activate a product or a banking service through an online onboarding process, because they think they can reach more convenient commercial conditions, and at the same time they can have lower cost and more speed of execution in activating a banking service. This is very important. So we know that there is already a cluster of customers that is very interested in having and in activating banking services only through the web, only through their mobile phone. Of course, this analysis has been done only focusing this kind of customer that have already used an online boarding process. But we know that this cluster is growing, so we need to be prepared in proposing more and more this kind of way to sell banking products. So my final remark is that in the near future, we will have every new product, every new banking service provided and sold through provided with an onboarding process, and we will see more and more growing the number of contracts signed by the customer only through the web. This is very important. This is a very game-changing step. Also because at the same time we talk about banks, but we see fintech that are providing only through the web in some way product and services that are provided also by the banks. So we, as a banking sector, need to move forward having a complete digital process for the customer. So this is just the first starting point, but that we have for this European funded project. I think it's important that the project is defining a model, an architecture, and also writing a white paper that could be useful for the institutions that is addressing these kind of issues. The objectives that the project have are first of all, leverage the potential of combining EIDAS-based identification and signature technologies to fully automate and secure the process of live registering. At the same time, we think it's important that we need to create a new generation of cross-border e-banking services. And this could be done putting together the solution we already see on every European country related to the identity management, like in Italy can be maybe SPID. In the future, we think it's more important that we will be able to integrate EIDAS centralized process, like for example in Italy SPID, with KYC procedures that are more distributed between the banks. So this is a challenge that we are trying to address with this European project. So this is just my first introduction. I think we will go deep in this topic, starting from our first speaker, that is Dr. Andrea Servida from the European Commission, one of the main and the most famous experts in identity management. Good afternoon, Mr. Servida. Do you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon to everybody. I see you, I don't see my slides. It is really a pleasure to be with you today. And I'm delighted to be able to contribute to this event, which, if I understand correctly, is part of a project which has seen the light in the context of initiatives that I have been pushing in the context of CEF when I was myself responsible for the EIDAS regulation. I don't see the slides in my screen. I don't know whether you can do something so that I can operate the slides myself. Is anybody taking my request? I don't hear anything. There is no return. Nobody. Okay, now I see. Very good. So thank you. So let's proceed. I have about, if I understand correctly, 20 minutes to move to give the I would say the speech. First of all, I would like to say that I'm really glad that we are talking about how we operationalize digital identity credentials in context like the financial banking sector, also in Italy, because I think that it is quite, I would say, a challenge everywhere, but I think that Italy has a lot to, I would say, offer in not only to learn. Why it is so important these days? Because I mean, it has never been so important on the political agenda, the interest in digital identity. Here you see two little excerpts. The first one is about the contribution by the speech by President Ursula von der Leyen on the speech on the State of the Union of the 16th of September 2020, where she announced an initiative by the Commission to put forward a proposal for a secure European identity, something that will be in the hands of the citizen and companies, so natural person, legal person, for them to be able to manage the data and manage their rights in relation to accessing and authenticating online for any type of service, meaning a regulated environment like the banking and payment sector, but also something that might be more at ease for the citizen to have access to in a secure, accountable, transparent way, that is the access to online services, online platform. And the idea of President von der Leyen was immediately picked up by the European Council, which in the conclusion of October this year, they asked for the Commission to come forward with this initiative by the second quarter of 2021. I think that this symphony between the the European Commission and the Council, which means the member states, has never been at this level, even during the, I would say, the early stage of the discussion on the ADAS regulation, where indeed the Council intervened more times to get the job done. But there had never been such a, I would say, political push for something to become operationally usable by the user online in a way that indeed will be most convenient for them. But before looking at what is going to be the new proposal that might see the light or would see the light during the course of the first part of next year, let's see where we stand. Where we stand is that, I mean, so far we have had quite a number of member states that have notified under the ADAS. We have about 60% of the people in Europe which could indeed leverage the electronic identification means that they have in their hands that they can use for the purpose of authenticating or identifying to public services in their countries to be seen and recognized across border. And this is important because the ADAS regulation provides the legal anchoring for what is indeed the enforceable, or I would say the legal recognition, the legal effect of using digital identity credentials cross-border. It's not only about credential like the Italian speed, which I would say, happy to see have reached nearly 14 million or a bit more than 14 million holders in Italy, but it means using speed also to open a bank account in Sweden or in Norway or in France without having to go via the process of, I would say, showing up in person in the branch where the transaction is to be done. How this is possible? It's possible because since the adoption of EIADAS in 2014, we have been working hard to make the electronic identity and the trust services which are regulated under the EIADAS to become an integral part of a number of regulations where authentication or identification steps might indeed become or should become digital. Here you see, for instance, what has been done already, like getting the full recognition of EIADAS notified electronic identity of level substantial and high as legally enforcing the identification and authentication of a person who is the holder of such a credential. This doesn't mean that the authentication only on EIADAS will complete the need to provide certain data in relation to what might be the onboarding of the person, but certainly the credentials that are provided by the EIADAS do establish two things. First, the unique link between the person who is indeed authenticating to a prospective bank as a person that is legally, whose identity has been legally verified and linked to the credentials that are being used to knock at the door of the prospective bank. This is important because this notion of providing the legal anchoring is something that will indeed provide quite an opportunity for any type of provisioning of credentials, attestations, attributes, entitlements that would be needed in order to operationalize the use of identity everywhere. Of course, I mean, anti-money laundering is, I would say, the most important, but we have also had, I would say, this type of engagement in the context of the Payment Service Directive, in particular with respect to what is the handshaking between third-party trust service providers and banks for payment to be done in the context of strong customer authentication, but also in the company law, and even more importantly, we have seen, I would say, EIADAS to be recognized, and there is also an opinion of the DPS, as a privacy by design regulation that will naturally lead to the compliance with GDPR. Why so? Because I mean, I would say the provision of identity data that will be needed in order to ensure the proper identity of a person that is knocking digitally at the door of a service is indeed minimized as defined in the regulation, which means that under IADAS we can really enforce the vision by which the electronic identity do speak for us, but doesn't speak about us, which means if I have to prove my age or having a minimum certain age and residence, I can provide two trustworthy attestations that will say yes, for the age I'm more than 18, and yes, for my residency in any country. It could be, Belgium or Italy or whatever, without having to disclose my date of birth, my place of residence, the composition of my family, and not even the identity, if indeed what is needed is just, I would say, the recognition, or I would say the acknowledgement of the attributes that I have just referred to. But all this is indeed, I would say, on the identity, but being the regulation technologically neutral, then of course, it provides also clauses, legal clauses, which are extremely important to provide the legal framework for new technological solutions like blockchain to indeed be usable cross-border. And this is definitely associated to the definition of legal document, which embrace the definition of a block. And of course, if you look at the way in which blockchain is operating, it is all about trust services, authentication, timestamping, signatures, and the legal validity of what is indeed the block in a blockchain, which then makes it natural for blockchain-based solution to become a way of provisioning attributes which might indeed be uniquely linked to the identity. In this respect, I just signaled to you an activity that we have ongoing at the European Commission in the context of the EPSI, which is indeed the IADAS breach, SSI IADAS breach, where indeed the articulation of identity provisioning on blockchain technological infrastructure and IADAS legal framework has been thoroughly, I would say, analyzed both from the technical but also from the legal perspective. But is all this sufficient for us to make best use of digital identity in the real world? No, it's not. Why it's not? Because the expectation is to have digital identity to become more usable, to become more easily, would say, more easily used in the type of online experience that we have. And even more important, there are market demands that makes digital identity attributes to become more and more the focus of transaction, because digital identity attributes, which means attributes which are linked in a unique and trustworthy way to verified identity, becomes more and more the way in which the legal obligation, like the verification of age, couldn't be, I would say, discharged as an obligation without having to collect and manage too many personal data, which might become indeed I would say, quite a burden. And of course, when we get to the platform, there is a need to somehow rebalance a bit what is the power game between those who are relying on platforms and the way in which the data which are somehow acquired on the platform are used. If we would be able to get a more, I would say, balanced approach, which means empowering users so that they will be able to use their identity to actuate the way in which behavioral data can indeed be indeed crunched for the provision of any service, we will be able to some extent to have a better way of authenticating without disclosing. The disclosure being part of what might be any sort of deals that could indeed freely be established between the user and the providers. So what is the vision of the European digital identity? The idea is to go versus or in the direction of providing digital identity solutions that will be universally available, which means they should be available seamless across those platforms, whether it is iPhone, personal iPad, information devices that are indeed in the hands, and more will come in the future as opportunities for users to conduct their transaction online. It should be universally usable, which means we have to go beyond what is the legal obligation that is now in the context of the others regulation for public administration to indeed recognize and accept under certain conditions, digital identity credentials as established by the others regulation and the implementing decision. But even more importantly, all this can be operationalized in order to incentivize the way in which digital identity could be provided, attributes could be provided in a way that will limit the disclosure of personal data to the very minimum which is needed for the provision of the service. Let's make an example. If I will in the future, and I'm dreaming now, if I would have, I'm Italian, I've lived in many countries, I'm now residing in Belgium, I have a bank account in Belgium. There is nothing that should indeed impede myself to give the mandate to my bank here to give the KYC attestation that I have concluded, in order to get the bank account here in Belgium to a new bank that I may indeed where I may like to open myself an account, in Italy, in Sweden, or in any other member states. Why? Because of the roaming that we establish on the ID, it would be possible with some work, because nothing is like a free lunch, there is still work to do, but it would be possible to have the portability of KYC across boundaries. This was actually the very, objectives of the expert group that we launched back in 2017 to see how we can put indeed the EIDAS at work in relation of indeed making it possible for the electronic identity and then for the recognition, the legal recognition of electronic identity to become the anchor, the trust anchor for attributes, attestation, entitlements to be recognized across border. What will be the basic features of the European digital identity that we hope to see the light, will see the light at the beginning of next year? It should be certainly usable on mobile application, should be mobile. If we would have something that will not be as close to the user as the mobile, environment where we do all now, conduct our transaction, then we will fail. It should be based on common standards, because we should not go for a unique single solution, because it will be very difficult to realize. We need to ensure that there will be common standards to pursue and favor interoperability, which is linked to enforceability and the possibility for credentials to be recognized and to be usable across sector and across boundaries. And of course, we should focus on credential proofs. I should prove that I'm Italian is a trustworthy yes, to be enforced by those who need to enforce that the yes is correct. I don't need to say that I'm Italian, was born in Milan or in Rome or something else. And I think that is a change of culture, because the articulation of the use of EID and digital identity within the framework and in compliance with the principle of GDPR may become a business opportunity for everybody. But to become a business opportunity, then it should be operationalized. How to operationalize? This is just, an idea of what the ecosystem may look like. How to be realized is to be seen. Certainly there are more, actors that will have to play a role. We have the member states, because at least in Europe, in particular in certain countries, the trust anchor of identity, and which is linked very much to citizenship, is in the states, is in the government, is in the states actually, and the states has these authentic source which do substantiate what are the attributes of the identity. I'm a human being, so I'm Andres Servida, but everything that is related to Andres Servida is the ensemble of data which have made me to be a citizen of Italy, who has lived in certain countries, who have done something in a bit everywhere in Europe. But in order to make this wealth to be used, we need to have intermediaries, we need to have identity providers, we need to have attestation providers, attributes providers, which indeed under the controls of the user will be able to provide the proofs that will be needed, for me to authenticate to an online platform that need to prove that I'm a real person, not just a bot, and For doing this, they don't need to have my telephone number. They need just to have an assertion that will be provided by a speed trust service provider who would say, this person, whatever it is indeed a person. Do I want to disclose my identity? I will do it. If I don't want, I should be able not to do it. But the proof is enforceable, and this is enforceable across the 27 member states. So what it means in terms of, I would say, the way forward and the roles, it's clear that an ecosystem is to be realized, many roles, which I think the proposal will clarify and will enable even more in their missions. But here you see that the user have a role in order to become the actor of operationalization of the identity. But we also see that there is a new, I would say, opportunities. There are new opportunities for service provider, identity, and credential providers. I mean, service provider can really get a better way of managing their risk related, for instance, to, I would say, the disclosure of, or the risk of disclosure or accidental disclosure of personal data by simply reducing the number of personal data. What will be the key, I would say, benefit for the user? Certainly, the key to the digital universe: seamless, continuous, trustworthy, accountable, transparent, so that there will not be any sort of, I would say, double, or multiple proliferation of data acquisition center that will gather more and more my data, my telephone number, my place of residence, because there is no need. The one solely principle, which I'd mentioned in an earlier slides, can be enforced across sector. If somebody, my identity provider, my speed providers, knows my date of birth, I don't need to replicate this anywhere else. I may give the proof that I'm more than 50 or less than 25, but I don't need to disclose the date of birth unless there is a legitimate reason, which is related to something that can only be achieved via the, I would say, the full disclosure of this data. For the service provider, certainly there is, I would say, the benefit is that there will be a level playing field, and of course, there is a clear, I would say, opportunities to reduce cost and the risk, therefore risk of liability and possible liabilities. But it is also important to profile the way in which services will be provided, being as like, for the environment, I'm, from the point of view of the environment, I'm clean. You can have services from the point of view of GDPR or data protection that they're clean, because indeed they do make the best use of what is already available and usable for the citizen. Is this all science fiction? No, and actually I don't think that it is. And I think that this is indeed something that would be even further operationalized. And here I've put just a reference to two recent two proposals that were put forward by the Commission in the package of last September. One is on digital finance strategy for EU, and the other one is for retail payment. Both look at the others as the possibility for a renewed way of going forward in this direction. Is this something that is, I would say, being pursued in a multi-jurisdictional way everywhere else in Europe? No. Everywhere else in the world? No. Europe is the only region where this approach is multi-jurisdiction, where we have the technology, the policy, the regulation, and the business model. I think that this is something that should make us very proud, but there is still quite a lot of work to be done. And of course, events like this do bring together the right people to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Servida. A very important presentation for us. You underlined the two main drivers that we need to take in account, developing also the project. First of all, the identity management for the finance and banking sector is a priority for the European Commission. As you have described, there is a digital strategy for the banking financial sector that underlines the identity manager as a key driver to promote a more complete digitalization. The second, the important message that we have got from your presentation is that there is a process of convergence, or the process of having a centralized approach, ADAS based, and a distributed approach related also to a DLT and blockchain technologies. And these are two kind of the data, the two kind of ways to collect and share data that should be integrated. It's not easy, it's not an easy model, and but within our project we have already started thinking and creating an architecture that we think could manage this convergence. So now I would like to give the floor to the Athens Stock Exchange representative, that is the coordinator of this project, and I give the floor to Mr. Nikos Skarvelakis, and thank you very much. You are doing a very important job coordinating this complex project. Thank you very much. Please, you can describe the project and also the following presentation. Thank you very much.
Oh, perfect. We don't hear you.
Cool.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Thank you, Mr. Romano, for the introduction. I will start from the beginning. Indeed, I believe that this is a complex and very interesting project. So it's very worth doing very interesting and innovating things in order to boost the European Commission and all member states in order to assimilate a common strategy and approach on this digital identification. As Mr. Romano said, my name is Nikos Skarvelakis and I'm working for Athens Stock Exchange with the role of project manager of this European project. Today I will try to present you a very high-level picture of what we are doing within the project, what are the main goals and scopes and the challenges that are addressed within this project, what European Commission is expecting from us as a result, and why European Commission is caring about this project. And at the end, I will also show you some slides and presentation about the current working that we are doing in cooperation with National Bank of Greece about the AI Marketplace. The AI Marketplace is a new product that we are creating in order to boost this innovation that is referred from this project. Thank you for the participation and your time for this workshop. So we can start with the first slide. Okay, as you can see in these slides, the project has different organizations. The Athens Stock Exchange is the project coordinator. We are having the University of Aegean. We are having the National Bank of Greece. And we are having also the EIB lab that is doing mostly the research, and they are helping us with the innovation and the research aspects. As you can see at the right, at the roadmap section, the project is divided into 6 activities. The first activity is the project management, so that's why I'm not describing here. The other activities are describing some new ideas and approach. The overall approach of the project is the combination of AIDAS network and e-signature technologies in order to create automated and secured solutions for online registration within a bank. So this is the main target of the project, in order to combine online digital services of a bank with a combination of remote signatures and AIDAS network in order to use the AIDAS for the remote identification. The first activity is focused on the creation of a remote digital onboarding process and application in order for, let's move on the other slide. So the first activity, with the name of activity 2, is describes the creation of a remote digital onboarding application in order for a user remotely, and of course using the AIDAS network. So we are talking that this application can be used by any foreign user, not belongs to the Greek nationality, in order to be able to create remotely and open a bank account within a national bank of Greece. So the National Bank of Greece, which is the main player in the project, meaning the main player that this is the bank where the entire development will be done within their premises. So the National Bank of Greece has taken the responsibility in order to implement and deploy this application and give the opportunity to other users to be able to follow a remote identification procedure using the AIDAS network, and based on the methodology that the National Bank of Greece follows, to give them the possibility to open a bank account and at the end to sign the contract for this creation using a short-lived digital certification and signature. This is the scope of activity 2. The other activity, the activity 3, describes a product with the name iMarketplace. This is the product, the iMarketplace. The main scope of this product is to give the possibility to different vendors, merchants, to register themselves into this iMarketplace and give the possibility to users, not foreign users from other nationalities, to pay or commit transactions with those vendors. The contract describes that at the beginning of iMarketplace, the minimum retailers, merchants that have to be added in this iMarketplace are telecom providers, banking providers, public power supplies, water supplies, etc. Meaning that we are going to use some common merchants that are very common here in Greece for online payments. And through this iMarketplace, we'll also provide some more features in order to provide some benefits through this product and to give the possibility for more selections and options to the users. The last product that will be developed by National Bank of Greece is Activity 5, and Activity 5 is a product with a culture of creating B2B services, meaning that we are going to provide some services as a service, as B2B to service, in order to give the possibility to any third parties to implement, to add, and to import and to integrate to their platforms our solution. So if anyone is interested in importing National Bank of Greece financial services into his site or into his application, he can do that by integrating our B2B services into his application. So the scope is to implement the aforementioned services, both digital onboarding and iMarketplace as B2B services in order to be used by third parties. The last activity, which is in the scope of this project, is the activity 6. The goal of activity 6 is to create a common interesting to other parties and to European Commission in order to support this innovative project and help to create more opportunities in the future. So the activity 6 has the main goal of developing research on this approach and to provide current results and solutions and proposals to the European Commission in order to persuade them that indeed there is a challenge on this area. We are describing that we are here and we are having those difficulties, and our difficulties in the future can be solved by implementing those approaches. Because the main focus of European Commission, as you already know, is to create a center hub in order to give the possibility to member states to use public services from all different European countries that belong to the European Union. So I more or less I described the scope of the project. Moving to this slide, sorry. Here I describe some very useful challenges that the project is putting on the table for everyone. So as I mentioned, the main challenge of this project is to create impact and cross-border interest for the generation of new iBanking services, to promote the AIDAS authentication, because the AIDAS can be a future network in order to use for remote identification and customer identity. At this point, many countries have already joined the AIDAS network. Also here in Greece, we are working on this approach in order to create and support this network, and in the future provide new proposals and ideas about improving those areas that we are already doing within this project. Now I am moving to present you the iMarketplace in order to give you some ideas what we are doing right now with National Bank of Greece. As I said, the National Bank of Greece is the main player from a bank's perspective, and National Bank of Greece is implementing the services within their premises. European University of the Aegean and EIB Lab are contributing, along with the Athens, of course, the Athens Stock Exchange, with ideas, innovations, and consultancy in providing more efficient ways in order to help National Bank of Greece to become more innovative and provide more challenging products. The first screen of iMarketplace, as you can see in the screen, is that the user, after the success, once he logs in to the iMarket environment of National Bank of Greece, has three options. Either the first option is the option that the user can pay bill payments online through the National Bank of system, through iMarketplace. The second option is for merchants in order for any merchant can register himself within his iMarketplace and be available to any user if any user wants to commit a transaction with this specific merchant. And the third option is an option where National Bank of Greece provides APIs, B2B services, some already B2B services to third party in order for a B2B integration. And this option is done through a subscription to the respective service from the user. The second screen here presents the option where the user selects to commit a transaction and pay a bill payment for a specific merchant. First of all, in order to see the screen, there is a screen before that screen where the system asks from the user either to provide national username or password or to provide the EIDAS account for the authentication and for the identification. So after successful authentication and identification, here the user selects to pay a payment, a bill. He selects to pay a telecom provider, Vodafone, for example. He provides the specific amount, and he has two options for payment, either through web banking or through a credit card. At this moment, we are going to use only National Bank of Greece web banking system in order for a user to be able to commit this transaction through web banking. In the future, National Bank of Greece is working on this approach. We will be able to use all national banks of Greece for or National Bank of Greece, or the web banking of all National Bank of Greece. And in the future, National Bank of Greece has promised that the network can be expanded further using in some other banks from other nationalities. The option using by credit card can be done because they are using or MasterCard on Visa, so there is no limitation of that. The other two capabilities that the user is having through iMarketplace is either to create a standing order for this merchant or to create tokenizations. The standing order is for the case where the user wants to pay this specific transaction for every month for a specific amount. So he has the ability to define the merchant, the amount and the period every month, every 15 days, I don't know, of this transaction in order to be able to this transaction to be executed automatically. The other option that is having is to create tokens. What is a token? Token is a sequence, a QR code, and I think that Visa is already doing this, where within this token we are keeping the merchant and the bank account that the user wants to use in order to commit any transaction. So whenever the user wants to pay a bill payment for a telecom provider, let's say, he can use this token directly and he can gain more time in order to proceed with the transaction. So so there is no he can gain time in order not to put every time the information about the merchant, the bank account details, and what other information each merchant expects in order for the completion of this transaction. As I said before, except for the web banking method that the user can use in order to execute any transaction, he has also the possibility to use his credit card. So the system redirects the user to e-commerce page of National Bank of Greece in order to use his credit card and commit the transaction. Here also the user has the possibility either to create standing orders or to create tokens for specific transactions. Okay, more or less, this is the approach of the AI marketplace. I don't have anything else to mention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikos. Thank you, Nikos. Emiliano Zlot speaking. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We have also to merci you for your presentation, very interesting, where you presented the model that we will see adopted during the project, and that this model will be finally available for the customers, European customers that would like to enter in the set of services that National Bank of Greece will make available. And now I will introduce my colleague Giulio Murri from EIB Lab, that will present the results of the survey done on the Italian digital onboarding toward a sample of several Italian banks. Microphone to you, Giulio.
Thank you. Thank you, Emiliano. Good afternoon, everyone. I ask please the loading of a presentation. Okay, I'm Giulio Murri, the coordinator of the digital transformation research area in EIB Lab. This presentation is divided in two parts. I will start with a high-level overview on the digital onboarding scenario in Italy for the Italian banks. Then I leave the floor to Emiliano, who will provide you with the additional details on the EIB project. So this first part of the presentation includes some evidence of a survey on digital channels. This survey investigates different aspects, such as number of mobile apps offered, kind of services on mobile and internet banking, the strategy on the digital banking channels, and so on. A specific section of this survey is entirely dedicated to digital onboarding. So we can start with the first data, the starting point where we are. 66% of banks. Oh, sorry. An important information. This survey involved a representative sample of Italian banks and was compiled in March or April 2020. 66% of banks include digital onboarding in their offer. An additional 17% will add by the end of 2020. So we can say that about 83% of this sample provide digital onboarding. We just saw before in the opening of Mr. Stasi the channel always used by the banks is internet banking. Interesting to underline the 57% of the banks offered digital onboarding by smartphone app. Main benefits are an improving user experience, competitive positioning, and digital first customer acquisition. Okay, digital onboarding is typically associated with checking account opening. but it's not always like this. It's not an equation. It's interesting, this chart show us 65% of the responding banks expect the checking account to be the first relationship opened in case of a digital onboarding. So in this case, we are talking about it's a kind of filter in the relationship between banks and customer. It's very interesting to pay attention on the 35% of this sample. In this case, it's possible to open the relationship with bank with other product services without the necessary subscription of checking account. It's very interesting. Prepaid card and enabling internet banking services are the option more indicated. Okay, so we are talking about the diversity of digital onboarding. It's not an equation. Digital onboarding is not only checking account opening, there is a wider range of products, services. We show in this chart this wider range of services. Accounts, checking and savings, and cards are the most indicated options. It's interesting to mention that some banks have a standard offer, a sort of a bundle offer, where accounts and cards are offered jointly, possibly combined with other more complex services, which is loans and leasing. In this chart, we can see that digital banking offer is more developed on internet banking than mobile banking. We can move on. Okay, this is a very interesting issue. In the last years, the banks have been increasing focused attention on non-banking services. So this seems like a paradox, but non-banking services can be an additional access point to open a relationship between banks and customer. So we can see this data. The most widespread services in this sense is the supply of digital identity. Interesting to underline that the expected data by the end of 2020, 30% of sample indicated the digital identity. So it will be very useful to see the confirmation of this provision in the next survey in the first part of 2021. You can move on? Okay. Here we are with a more technological topic, remote identification mode. We can see video call with an operator is the most widespread remote identification mode. Likely for the similar user experience of the branch experience. We can say that some banks are engaged on self-recognition ways. So another important data in this chart is related to digital identity. Was expected as a remote customer identification way by the 24% of this sample, both mobile, internet banking. Also in this case, it will be very useful to see the confirmation of this prevision in the next survey. Okay, the last slide, the last view. Omnichannel is the one of the most key issue in the digital banking offer, in general in the banking offer. We're talking about channel interaction. For example, to give to the customer the possibility to start an operation with a channel and then keep on other channel and finish this operation with the other channel. This is possible from digital to physical or vice versa. It is very interesting to extend this omni-channel also in the digital onboarding. This is the very interesting next step. It's interesting to see in this sample, we can say that almost the half of the sample, 48% of this sample indicate already available or expected by the end of this year, the integration from, in this case, from mobile to internet banking. Then it's possible from internet to mobile banking, and for sure from internet or mobile banking to physical channels. So this is a very interesting element. Okay, I finished this quick overview. I remember you that all this data on digital onboarding and more in general on digital banking channels are available in EIB Lab report, in our site, in EIB Lab site. I leave the floor to Emiliano for the second part of presentation for further details on the EIB project. Thank you.
Giulio. Thank you, Giulio. Thank you for your very useful information and the bunch of data that you provide us. And we started from this. We started from the information given by the Italian banks in order to understand what are the main topics of the banks in creating and the onboarding procedures for new financial services. So, first slide, please. Next slide. We started the discussion with the project participants, and also on top of this, we created an industry monitoring group where there are also on top of the already mentioned participants, there are banks like Intesa San Paolo Bank, Caixa Bank, there are processors like SIA, and there are also technical expertise from the market like InfoCert that supported us in discussing what are the research perspectives for the next future. We discussed both in parallel the opportunities of the e-marketplace that Nikos presented before, and also on top of this, we discussed about what is the best method in order to achieve an interoperable model of identity for the whole Europe, because we are talking about an European market. We see that there are several national identity models that are already used in the banking sector, but there are no experience yet at European level. This is a problem that we have to face, considering that also the interest of growing the role of digital identity in the financial sector. So for this is why we started creating a white paper where there are two main chapters. The first chapter is the description of the situation we have, the drivers for regulatory aspects, the evolution of existing ID models, federated, self-sovereign, and self-attestation, example of European national successful collaboration. The second chapter we discussed as a separate model from the marketplace presented by Nikos, a theoretical, but will become more real during the project, the digital customer onboarding product service for the banks for the next future. This we call it the EIB model. Next slide. And we started from the consideration what are the identity models today in place. First of all, the most widespread diffused model is the centralized model, where there are silos. Every website, every service collect information about the customer, the citizen, and taking safe in a not connected area. So the problem is here that you have to onboard several times the customers and for allowing him to have all the service he needs. Then we moved on what is going on the market with the federated identity models that is now used in a web form that is used by Google or Facebook to allow the customers to onboard for non-financial service. But the problem for this light federated model is that they are not usable at financial level because they have no relation with the anti-money laundering prescription that the banks have to face. Then there is the centralized model where we discuss about the DLT and cryptography solution that will allow the customer to be the owner of his own identity and to charge on his own structure, his own mobile phone, if we want, the data he needs to do the onboarding on certain service. This is a long discussion that is taking place in the industry and the research sector because it moves from at least 10 years from the self-sovereign identity model, where there are several applications. And we collected this information about the models, as I said before, and we compared with the fact that in Italy, 38% of the customers have a problem in onboarding and they abandon the procedure because they feel it too much complex to conclude the onboarding. So what is the best way for the customer to be onboarded in a new financial service? Next slide. We are describing in this day a new digital identity model, as I said, it's called the EIB model, where there are a market where the banks or financial sector operators could interact with the other economical actors for needing to have information about new customer, to exchange information about the verifiable credentials, attributes, attestates of the customer to give him the chance to access their service. What we had in mind is to discuss a four-corner models like we have in card payment, that because the four-corner model is differently from the closed loop, it gives the chance to be widespread diffused, to be interoperable at very high level with several national systems that we already have. So if you put on top of the already existing national identity models a kind of four-corner model, you will be potentially able to connect the already existing national solution in a trying to create an European solution, so a sort of federation. This will mean that there is a need to create an identity governance service that will be the scheme owner of the identity, that will give the rules about the functioning of this identity scheme. About the technical aspects, we are discussing also how to exchange the information. And then there are several aspects that have to be considered and we will do in the next future. And we will see that during the round table also Luca will give some short representation about this. There are at least two potential ways to send information through the operators at European level. One, to consider the switches like we have for the card payment and to send information up and down in Europe, or to create or to use a blockchain already existing as a network in order to share the information needed. Both solutions have pros and cons, but we are considering to produce during the next months a representation of this potentiality during the next reports of the EIB project. Next slide. What are at the moment the main findings? First of all, we discovered, discussing with the banks that are participating to the industry monitoring group, that very different procedures are using to onboard digitally and remotely the customers. So if you talk about digital onboarding, you're not talking about the same procedures used between the several banks. Then the EIDAS, as I already said previously, is very useful because it will give us the chance to have an handshake between partners in creating a contract and trust the identity of the operators and the customers in the digital landscape. There is a need to classify the Know Your Customer dataset, KYC dataset, and the trustable sources, because if we want to do completely digitally the onboarding activities, we need to have already on the digital platform all those information. Then this need to create a framework in where the operators can exchange trustfully and safely the information collected about the customers. Talking about banks, the banks could have a role in this, because for regulatory reasons, they already collect a lot of information about the customers, and there's already in practice several activities to maintain, the database about the customers. One of the main findings of the first year of activities is that we need collaboration, because even if we represent an industry sector like the financial one, or a technology company, or also the government, everyone alone cannot conclude the digital identity exchange of information, because then there is everyone has a role in this chain. So we are here as a European project to collaborate with institutions, with other economical private partners to find this solution that it's a pleasure to know to us that is already ongoing at the institutional level. Having said that, I will give the microphone to Petros, that will start with the very interesting roundtable that I invite you to follow. And please, Petros, it's your time.
Good evening to everyone. I want to thank the presenters for the nice talk they have did. And now I welcome all of you to a roundtable discussion. It will be short and clever, I hope. Today we'll discuss how the digital transformation of the banking sector meets the thriving digital identity systems, and how it can benefit from the ongoing technical innovation, which is accelerated, and the new plans for the growth and opening of EIDAS EID network, the pan-European network for cross-border identification and access to online services. Before introducing the panel, I want to dedicate this roundtable to the legacy of Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. Our union will miss his minded intelligence and action for the European integration. I have the honor to moderate a panel of distinguished speakers. We have with us Emiliano Angelotti, the policy person of this project, Luca Boldrin, from one of the leading QTSP, Qualified Trusted Service Providers in Europe, InfoCert, Jean-Philippe Joliveau from SIA Industrial Group and the Berlin Group Standards Initiative, Ronnie Tan, one of the main authors of a recent and very influential report from the European Commission on EID and eKYC, Mario Mavad Marcos from an innovation-oriented bank in Spain, CaixaBank, and Andrea Servida, the matière grise, to use a French word, of EIDAS policy and regulation. I want to start the panel by asking, next slide, please, by asking the speakers to identify and link together the different trends we are we can see, and we are now need to make them clear and provide the links between them. We have the digital customer onboarding, we have digital identity verification, which complements the typical process of digital identification. We have in perspective from the next year the strong customer authentication, and of course we have the EID 2.0 and beyond, as Andrea explained before. Mario, you represent a dynamic bank. I'm going to start from you. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to start with what all of us have been suffered from the last months. That is this issue with the COVID-19, and to point out that this in our case, and I assume that in the case of all banks in Europe and almost in all the world, have to assume that we have to work on a complete remote way. So we have been working with our customers, allowing to provide all our services remotely, because there were some months when we couldn't open any branch, physical branch. So this means that before we had the onboarding, digital onboarding, or other services that could that have to work partially digitally and partially physically. Now all the company has worked to provide everything digital. So I assume that in the next years this will accelerate. So the COVID has accelerated all this trend. And I think that most of the financial institutions will work hardly to be able to provide everything on a remote way. And in this case, EIDAS and signature and authentication is key, is crucial. So this has not make COVID in this case has foiled this trend. And well, in terms of security and fraud, I would say that impersonation is the most important threat when talking about security of our customers. So impersonation is about identity, and EIDAS can help a lot here. And well, we usually talk about digital identity and these things, thinking that impersonation could affect the remote channels, the electronic channels, mobile or web or whatever. But in fact, take into account that in our case, and I assume that in other cases, impersonation can also happen in the physical branches. So it's not because technology has advanced and now we have remote onboarding, for example, or remote signatures. It's because now identity is becoming more important, and even for the physical branch offices, we need tools to help physical employees to authenticate signatures, onboarding, or whatever, even for the physical branches. And just to finalize, I would say that this is also a question of competition. So from the business point of view, that is the most even more important than security, because it's why a bank exists. From the business point of view, it's crucial the way we authenticate the acceptance of the users, and I would point out that this is very important. And the competition between banks and between other platforms in future, big techs and etc., are based on the assumption that the customers will accept this all these processes based on these EIDAS and others. So it's very important for being competitive in relation with other players. So it's completely crucial. If we provide these services and it's not accepted by customers, we will not succeed. And well, these are the trends and thoughts from my side.
Thank you very much. It's clear there is a need for remote identity, for digital identity in this process for all European banks. But Andreas Vida, can I ask if there is also a need for a cross-border identification? Is the financial sector a real cross-border sector in the European economy?
This is a $1 million euro question. I mean, to some extent, I think that, I mean, let's put it differently. The financial sector has no choice but to innovate in a way that indeed it can keep up with what the digital is enabling. And I'm not talking about just, I would say, technological gadget on how we may or may not do things remotely, but on the way in which digital is changing the processes which have been for many years at the heart of what the financial sector is about. I mean, think of India, I mean, with Aadhaar, and I'm not promoting this as the model to use, you do payment between identities, not between bank accounts, between identities. Why? Because identities are linked to what is indeed the history and is centrally managed. Is this good? I'm not sure. But this is what is happening in the largest democracy that we have in the world. So in this respect, there are many challenges. Certainly, I think that there is also a lot of awareness that is to be somehow fostered in relation to what the digital is allowing to do even better than in the physical world. I remember that, I mean, it was not us saying, but, in discussion, there is always a bit of, I would say, a problem when the new technology has been deployed. But, let's face it, what is at the root of making electronic identification means a level high and level substantial to be recognized cross-border is a much more trustworthy, transparent, accountable, and reliable process than what you may think is happening, as a kind of physical process by somebody showing up with documents in front of a clerk in a little branch of bank. Why? Because those who have to be somehow recognized are going to go through a process which is auditable and which makes the digital credential to be as much higher level of trustworthiness than what is indeed linked to a paper. Simply, when I go and register, I go and show my document. Is the bank able to check whether my data are the one that should be in the document? And not really. They can check whether the document possibly is not, I would say, in the database of documents which are lost or stolen, but has no means for legitimate reason to check whether the data that are on that document are the one they should be. So in this respect, what I'm saying is that, I mean, there is a challenge, but there is plenty of opportunities. And let's face it, we have, I would say, a financial market that is already global. So, thinking of Europe not being cross-border is something that, makes me very concerned.
I see your point that digitization can promote also the cross-border activities in this sector. It is clear that the digitization covers now all the value chain of the identity verification, the identity validation. Ronnie, does it also include now the KYC part of the story? Because in the digital onboarding, any onboarding, there is a strong aspect of KYC. The bank should, from the legislation, should collect a lot of information for the potential bank owner. So is this process going to be digital, automated? Is that important right now?
Is this a question to me?
Yes, Ronnie.
Oh, absolutely. I think KYC is an entitlement. It's nothing more. It's like a residency. It's more sophisticated than residency, but it's an entitlement. So why should the KYC be different? To me, KYC is an entitlement. It's an attribute. Complex, but it's an attribute. This is why in 2017, when I was in charge, and actually I even tell you, to some extent there are analogies between what is indeed that digital identity is enabling. When we adopted the regulation in 2014, the first three sectors that were put on the table as the one where some sort of further work will have to be done in order to operationalize what the others framework was going to be enabling were banking, payment, transport. So what is the security experience that you have when you fly around? And the third one was indeed the sharing economies. All these new models of sharing values ranging from Airbnb to peer payment or peer-to-peer credits. So to me, I see KYC as an entitlement. I think, and that is the business, because once you have done it once, and you need to get the assertion that the KYC was done. Of course, I'm talking about the identity related, not the business related, because if I do a KYC in a saving for a saving banks is something, in terms of the business and the services that I'm receiving. If I do it for a merchant bank, is completely different. But for the identity, so what says to the bank that Andrea Servida is Andrea Servida, the one that he claims to be? The KYC is the same, because I'm the same Andrea Servida, despite the fact that I have perhaps two digital identity, because I have the electronic identity card and I have the speed one. I'm residing in Belgium, so I have also credential in Belgium. But there is where the complexity that may be overcome by the roaming that is associated to illegal enforceability that is done by others. But everything that is on top of it, that is to become a commodity. KYC, I see the KYC to be a commodity. Why? Because we are in the same framework. We are under the same regulation. If we can root the anchor of trust, that is what makes Andrea Servida to be distinguishable from anybody else, including the other 300,000 Andrea Servida that exist in Europe, that is the trust anchor that everybody should leverage. And then, somebody will tell you that I'm an engineer. Somebody else tells you that I'm married, I have 2 kids. If that is a piece of information that is needed, it's not that I have to tell you where I live and who is my utility, because I need to prove that indeed I'm the Andrea Servida. This is done upstream with something like the EID anchor to the others. But everything that is on top, so the digital identity on top, that is where I think there are plenty of opportunities for everybody to get well served in provisioning and consuming.
Thank you, Andrea. I think this is an opinion that gains ground in Europe. Ronnie Khan, you were part of a experts group which published a nice report on this convergence of the EID with the KYC activities. Could you please develop further on this issue? The KYC sector is also transforming now from a similar digital operation as it happens in the primary banking sector.
Well, there are several things happening at the moment. So what you're seeing is that within borders, you're starting to see the establishment of these know your customer utilities, which works within a border and are able to provide know your customer information in a kind of an ad hoc way between banks. if you look at this from a cross-border perspective, that's not working today. So look at, for instance, at my market, Norway. I can establish an account in any Norwegian bank electronically. I can get all the Norwegian customer information provided. But if I try to do that in Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Germany, it's not possible. And that has to do with harmonization of the rules and regulations in Europe. Even if they are supposed to be aligned, they are not when it comes to the practical details of what know your customer data is. But know your customer data is really a part of a bigger picture, what is called digital attestations or validation, where basically any information should be able to travel across the borders and be validated in a different country. And that's the biggest picture.
Thank you very much. There is a potential, and there's also this disconnection in some cases between the different European countries, or the difficulty of several sectors to adopt all this kind of innovation quickly. Jean-Philippe Joliveau, can we hope that a new generation of banking standards, open standards, can help this progressive transformation of the sector and increase the digitization of both processes, the EID, e-identification process, and the KYC collection process?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would say that I don't think standards are indispensable to make a digitalization or to make an initiative successful. We have many examples, but I would say that standards greatly contribute to the success of these kind of initiatives, and especially by making things easier for people to develop on the top of these standards and interact together. So you save a lot of time and you save a lot of money. And I think that we can have a very good example in what has been done by the Berlin Group, the association which we contribute to, which is an association of technical providers and financial institutions where we develop standards in specific areas. And one of the best examples was for the PSD2 open banking initiative, where the PSD2, the directive itself, did not state that any standard should be used. So it left the freedom to the market. And the market decided to collaborate by teaming up together through a workforce in the Berlin Group and design the API standards that would have been adopted by these group and by whoever wants, because it's not something that is that the Berlin Group is a not-for-profit association where all the standards are developed and freely available for the market to use them. The market is going to develop applications on top of that will generate revenue for the individual actors, but the standards is completely free. And today we can say that we can see that the Berlin Group standard, called NextGen PSD2, for the APIs, for the open banking interaction between fintech and banks, has been adopted by 70 to 80% of the market in Europe. So that's a very, very big success, and that shows that when you collaborate and build together something, it can contribute to the success of this initiative. And I believe, because there is a connection between identity and these PSD2 APIs, because of the strong customer authentication that is needed. So having a European electronic identity system will certainly be something that will contribute to the success also of the open banking APIs by allowing people to have strong customer authentication using an eIDAS certificate, for instance.
Apparently, there are a lot of forces pushing towards the further digitization and the use of digital identity and digital KYC in the sector. The technology, of course, is the main force creating new opportunities. We are talking recently about self-sovereign identities and verifiable credentials. Luca Polgrin, could you please introduce us to this interesting emerging landscape and how banks can make a use of these possibilities, opportunities?
Certainly. I have a couple of slides, if I may ask the organizers to show them on the screen.
Please go ahead with your slides.
Thank you. Okay, yes, I will briefly introduce to that. Okay, this is not, okay. We have two main issues, as we all know, which are related to customer identification and then the due diligence. We are normally dividing these two sectors. Clearly, they appear to be separate, but we also know that there's a convergence there. Okay, there's some progress on these areas, which is going through standards, both on the customer identification through the, identification of unique means for cross-border identification, and the bodies for improving due diligence, standards for due diligence. And this is going on. This is not probably enough. There's something which we may call the EU way for, say, putting the two things together. We understand that there's a convergence process behind. And this is a picture that you have seen many times, probably. It is adapted to the banking flavor. And it represents the case where there's convergence toward the user, which collects together identification as well as data related to its own KYC. This is probably one of the possible paradigms. It's not the only one, but we believe that it represents the possible EU way to, say, digital finance. It's quite distinct from other approaches that we have seen around. You know that in China, digital financing is booming, both in the payment sector and in the, say, in the credit, in the lending, in the asset sectors. And it's driven by too many factors, which is, well, the availability of a unique market, so no fragmentation. This is something which has been mentioned many times, and the availability of a large amount of data. Data which is sometimes not really protected. This is probably not, we are willing to say, overcome the fragmentation issue in Europe, and we are working in that direction, but we are not probably willing to renounce to sovereignty on data, on protection of personal data. So we are not going to adopt the Chinese model, like to say. Maybe we are more, say, happy with the Indian model, which has been mentioned by Andrea before, where there's the initiative of linking back accounts to Aadhaar identities. Aadhaar identities are much more than identifiers. They have biometrics, they have authentication means and the like. So we think that identity helps a lot in this direction. And thinking it a la European, we believe that we need an approach where you can use technologies like the verifiable credentials. Verifiable credentials are just a technical way of putting things together. Since we need a paradigm, and with paradigm we are quite happy with what we understand may be the self-sovereign model, and we need standards. Standards are emerging rapidly, and they allow to do things like that. You collect credentials from several providers, and you put together and you spend the way you prefer to work toward the third parties. So this is, I think, the way forward that we can imagine, unless we think of something completely different, which is a digital currency for EU as other countries are doing now.
Thank you, Luca. After this nice helicopter view on what is going on, I now want to push the discussion further. Banks becomes massive consumer of digital identity. This is clear, of digital identity verification, of digital document validation, and of course of EIDAS qualified signing service. Can they also become the providers of something that is more specific, a specific financial identity that can integrate EID attributes with KYC data? Is there a realistic opportunity here? What do you think Ronnie can?
So interesting you should ask. The banks in Norway are the issuers of electronic identities. We issue identities to all Norwegian citizens. And the same applies also in Denmark and in Sweden. So yes, clearly there's a business opportunity for the banks because they have to do all of this work anyway. And they can recuperate some of the Neue customer costs by going into the business of providing digital identities. As when it comes to kind of the next step on the ladder, which is providing more than identity, that's not settled yet because there are liability issues, there are GDPR issues, and they are, of course, making a business model to make that work that haven't been sold yet. But yes, if the banks are know that visiting time, they have very good opportunities to actually recuperate and do business on digital identities and not be the consumers of digital identities.
Thank you, Ronnie. We know the success of the Nordic example and some other examples in Europe right now, as in Belgium. I want to ask Luca, since Luca has this clear view on the technology trends, this kind of mixed identities can be really provided through verifiable credentials. Is this a sustainable approach for it?
I think so. You know that people in the identity management area like to think of unique identities and distinct personas. So I am one person, but I'm a different persona with respect to, say, my bank, to my university, to my employer, and so on. So in this case, you can think of the digital identity as kind of one of the personas, and personas can be implemented with the technological means we are aware of. Verifiable credentials is one of them, but many other tools are available to the same purpose. What the point here is, to me, is it really useful of thinking of a digital identity? Is it something which brings value to me, or what I need is indeed one overall identity that I can spend in many different areas? Well, I would tend to say that, in fact, whether the digital identity is successful as far as it is widely used. It will never take place if people does not use it daily. And financial identity is probably what people is going to use most, since you pay every single day and you make transactions continuously. While your identity for dealing with healthcare, with public administration, with school of your children, etc., you may be used perhaps 5-10 times per year. So I think that digital identity is a good concept in the sense that it might be the one which pushes a general purpose identity for people.
Thank you very much. Jean-Philippe, do you think that these new forms of identity can be tomorrow a part of the standardization activity of Berlin Group? Berlin Group was very active in PSD2 and post-PSD2 standardization. is this a potential topic to discuss with the Berlin Group as a perspective?
Well, yes, definitely. Although I don't think that the Berlin Group may take over all the activity of standardization, because there are aspects that are not really in our jurisdiction. Let's say I wouldn't go as far as saying that we could standardize the messages for the management of EIDAS request between an issuer and the person who needs to, or the system that needs to receive it. We may contribute possibly with other organizations. I think that would be really the best solution, and we can put the bit that are closer to the banking area, because as we are seeing, the e-identity is very, very important for banks and included in the KYC process, and especially make these connections to the existing API standards and other standards that have been developed. So we could contribute very much, and we would be happy to contribute very much to this activity.
Thank you very much. It's interesting. Noticed, Mario. Is it really interesting for a bank to have all in one the identity standard of a customer and the KYC standard? Is this a perspective for you?
Yeah, well, everything that could help to reduce fraud and also to help anti-money laundering, etc. It's very important. Take into account that for us, it's for a bank, it's a great burden to have to adopt all these regulations. So yeah, it's very interesting to have this both things together and be able to work with them.
Thank you very much. Andrea, we are in the beginning of a new policy discussion on the EIDAS, the next standards and the next policies we need in order to develop further the initial infrastructures and policies and regulations. And then there is this nice announcement from the European Commission about a common European identity. How do you envision things in a year or 2 years from now?
Oh, if I had the crystal ball, I will not be here talking to you. I will be doing money on the stock market, I suppose. But no, apart from joking, I think that before answering your question, what will be, what I envision to be the situation in 1 or 2 years. Let me say something. When we talk about European digital identity, or I would say when President Ursula von der Leyen made reference to European digital identity, she didn't spell out that we need to have a unique sole identity which is to be used as such everywhere. Like, for anything that I do, I use the passport. As it was, for instance, I would say, attempt that was done after 9/11 in the US to introduce strong authentication everywhere on internet, which is not what we are talking about. I think the digital identity is indeed but that makes me to be able to authenticate thoroughly in relation to what is the service that I want to have access to, which might indeed be related to some properties, privilege, which need to be attested, asserted, in relation to a verification of my identity that has happened before. So I'm more than 18, I can buy alcohol. I'm Italian, I can get access, and more than 18, I can get access to licensed online game. I'm more than 18 and whatever else, I can get a bank account. But the thorough identification process is only needed very seldom. It's not that often that even in the physical world. We don't go. We go for more authentication and authorization. What makes me to be authorized to do something. And that is the thrust. This is why anything that goes, so, and now I come back to what it will be in 1-2 years. In 1-2 years, I think that there will be a lot of activities in trying to realize what the ecosystem, because we have been trying to push the development of the ecosystem, but the business case wasn't there. And to get the business case right there, it is important that we do make it easy for the user to spend, to use their digital identity credential, their attestations, their assertion, their attributes, their entitlement, but for the receiving. So those who are indeed consuming these statements, assertion, attestation, entitlement, to have convenience or to be attracted, to be incentivized in doing it. So certainly, I think that in a couple of years' time, we hope that the new proposal will be in place. But even more important, it will be, I would say, the type of developments that will indeed accompany what is needed to make things to be cross-border, to be cross-sector. That is, there are standards. I mean, I thought that one of the speakers said, okay, we don't need standard. Perhaps it was referring not to European standard or standards carried out, or I would say developed by European organization. I'm not entering into it, but certainly even in what was presented, I mean, you boils down to standard, because you can't have just one solution that applies everywhere, otherwise it becomes a single point of vulnerability. So standard is a safeguard. And let's not forget, already now, EIDAS is based on heterogeneous type of solution, very different solution from one to another. And the standard is what that makes the data that should be transacted interoperable and recognized. So I see in 1-2 years, much more interest, if it will be good, by those who would indeed benefit. First, the user. Why should I give my telephone number in order to prove that I'm addressed via to Facebook? I'm sorry, this is out of question. This is disproportionate. There are many other reasons. If I had, as there are the colleagues here from Italy, if I have an identity from SPID, my identity provided from SPID could associate to my profile a stamp that says this person has been identified as a verified identity, full stop. If I want to disclose that I'm under surveillance, I do it, otherwise I don't. And certainly Facebook doesn't need my telephone number to prove that I'm under surveillance. So I think that all these will accompany, a development of awareness that we should be more in control with favor solution like the one that Luca was putting forward. But of course, I mean, this is a long journey, so it's not going to happen overnight for sure.
Thank you very much. I retain the conclusion that this new identity we experience now, we expect to see evolving in the next year, is also a right for the citizens, because by using this identity can protect more their privacy rights, and their private life as a result. Thank you all of you for the participation of this discussion. The discussion was really nice, but nice things should finish quickly. This is one of the loss of the life. I turn to Emiliano now. Emiliano, please, could you help us to conclude on this discussion and the work we do in the EIB project?
Thank you, Petros. We will have another year of activity, more or less, in the EIB project. So during the next months, we will face a cost analysis about the model we are putting in place in order to discuss with the community the sustainability of the model we have in mind. During next months, also, we will discuss with Luca and with the InfoCert the adoption of the model that we described before, with the identity governance service deployed in a context where self-sovereign identity merges and potentially includes the application, the usage inside the bank app. So we are trying to understand with Luca if we are able to create a demo of a solution that will allow to show what will be the benefit for banks and customers to have inside the bank app all the needed information to related to identity. This will be interesting, and this will be demanded to the next year of activity of the EIB project. Meanwhile, together with Nikos and the National Bank of Greece, we will work in the other system that we will put in place, the e-marketplace, that is a closed loop mainly system that we will see how we'll be able to implement cross-border onboarding from other market than Greece, and then we will propose this and during the next event that will happen in the second half of 2021. Then there will be perhaps other presentation about this project during next months. At this stage, I think that it will be interesting for us to show our activity to the authorities and also to be potentially supportive of the activity that is going on at the European level. And then we are very curious about the next regulation that we will have to adopt and we'll have to endorse in our ongoing activity. So this is why I'm asking you, Petros, if you want to thanks again the Andrea for his presentation and for his useful information he gave up. And then I would like, together with you, send all the participants of this video to the next events that will be in the next year. I don't know if any other would like to conclude this section. This is, I think, that has been very interesting for all of us.
May I?
Yes, of course.
Please.
Just to jet the last thought, because I wanted to do it, but then okay, I fell short. Just to keep in mind, you have heard all these announcements about Libra and Facebook. I mean, this is the way you can see platform to become legitimate identity provider, because the challenge of the future will not be on the way in which you transact the money, but the way in which you transact the identity and everything that is associated to the identity, because the money can be an attribute of the identity, as it is to some extent already notionally happening in India. Why I'm saying this, because I think there is much more to come, and I think that is important to see ahead of the tsunami that is going to all hit us. But Europe is well placed because we have I would say the knowledge, the creativity, the ideas, and the experience on how to make it on a multi-jurisdictional, I would say, level. And that is indeed a strength. So, I wish you and the colleagues all the success for what you do, your project, your activities. Thank you for hosting this event and for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank all of the speakers. Thank you. I want to thank also the audience, those you were with us during these 2 hours. I hope we'll have the opportunity to meet again and discuss the next evolutions in this complex and interesting sector, which is the financial sector, and how the financial sector becomes aggressively digital. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.